Welcome to Transforming with Drew, where we talk about all things transgender from F to M to M to Fs and how to change your life for the better. Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to introduce our guest to the Transforming with Drew podcast, where we talk about all things trans, and we have Declan. Hello, Declan. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So would you like to introduce yourself to the audience a little bit, maybe get them a little bit more about you, where you're from?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Declan Pierce. My pronouns are he, him. I grew up in Texas, but currently am living in Maine, and I love it up here.
Okay, I know what you think about because I just moved recently up to the East Coast as well, which has kind of been fun for me, except for today's weather. If anybody knows what July weather is in this other area, it sucks.
Yeah, pretty wet and groggy.
Yes. So, how old were you when you finally realized that you wanted to start living in your truest form, and what were the steps for you in becoming Declan?
Um, yeah, I would say that I was 28 when I came out, and I'm 29 now. I'll be 30 in August. And so it was a little over a year ago in COVID, in quarantine, that I really was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I'm finally gonna do it. I had known for a while. It was just one of those things that's like, oh, I'm never gonna do it. I know that I would love to do that transition and go through all those steps, but I just never had the courage to do it. But then it wasn't until quarantine when I really was home alone by myself for a long periods of time, got to do a lot of journaling, a lot of self-reflection, and realizing like what's important to me in my life instead of what's important to making other people comfortable, I guess. And so I really kind of kicked the door down last June is when I came out publicly. But I've known for years. I identified as a lesbian for 5 years. So I came out as, I always said gay. I never really liked the term lesbian because I'm not one. And so I identified as queer or gay for 5 years, came out at 23. And then it was just kind of like, oh, that'll be good enough that I'm queer. That'll be good enough. And I won't have to come out and like tell people that I'm trans. Because growing up in South Texas in a religious kind of area, a religious community, my parents are prominent in our religious community. I knew that it was just something that wasn't done, and I didn't know anyone else that had done it, so I just figured I'm never going to do that. But I came up to Maine in January of 2019, and I very much moved because I knew that I had to get away from that community and see what happens. I was like, I want to see what kind of person I become when I don't have all these like lifelong hometown pressures that I'm putting on myself. No one was really putting on me, but I needed to break away and have that freedom and create a life somewhere else. And that was kind of the start of the whole journey. When I moved up here, I started dressing more masculinely. I had just chopped all my hair off. But was still very much of the mindset of like, if someone asked if I was trans, I would say no. I'd be like, no, that's okay, no. But in my head, I'm like, well, yeah.
It's
So
actually
I don't know, I've been my biggest roadblock, I guess. But starting last June was when I was like, we're done doing this. Because if I want to live a long life, I need to do what makes me happy, not what is comfortable for other people necessarily. So
I don't know. I actually 100% agree. So I actually came out as queer-ish, lesbian, whatever you want to call it, at like 19, and I thought that'd be fine. And then my wife called me out on it in our first 6 months of us dating. She says, if we ever transition, I'll fully support you and I'll love you. And I remember being like, no, I'm closest thing to transgender you'll ever get without transitioning. And every time anybody would ask me, I'd be like, no, I'm not transgender. I'm the closest thing you'll always get before, without actually transitioning. And for some odd reason, I just kept blocking myself. And I think I was at the same aspect that you. I actually have a very Catholic family. And I was so worried and so concerned because I know I was really lucky, though, because my Catholic family already supported me being with women at the time. And I was like, I'm lucky. I don't want to push this. So then eventually I pushed it, which was a couple months, and then my family's just great and they're supportive, which I'm very lucky and I know I'm very blessed for that. Not everybody gets that. So speaking of transitioning, how has it been for you? You use Plume, don't you?
I don't use Plume. I looked into Plume, but I when I went and talked to my PCP, it turns out she like specializes in queer treatment,
Ooh.
which I had just been referred to this primary care physician because I had asked in a Facebook group, like, I need a queer friendly person, just someone who like is kind to queer people. So when I went to see her, I knew that she was queer friendly, but I didn't realize that her entire specialty was mostly queer like medicine and healthcare.
Okay.
So when I found out that I could go through her, that kind of was a no-brainer. She is currently leaving the practice though, so I'm in the process of being like transferred to a new doctor at this
Yeah.
spot, which I'm hoping will be fine. But yeah, so I go through PCP now. I don't know if that is what I will continue with. I might be looking into Plume again. They're definitely up in Maine, because I've got a friend that goes through them, and there's no wrong way to get your
No,
hormones.
no,
I think.
I do. I have used Planned Parenthood, and they're like my biggest advocate because
Hmm.
not to say that all Walgreens are bad. My Walgreens just had a bad pharmacist who just kind of. It's actually so. I'm gonna touch base on your recent TikTok. You went in to go fill a prescription, and you said you struggled, and I understand that. And on all my documents, I do have it where it says preferred name, and this person actually refused to call me by my preferred name and kept referring to me as my dead name. And it got to the point where I called Planned Parenthood and said, "Hey, can you please switch me pharmacies? This is what's happening." Next thing you know, they called. They yelled at the pharmacist for me. Or so this is how amazing my doctor is in Planned Parenthood. And then she transferred me over to a place. And ever since I went to this place, and I was just honest about it. It's like, look, I'm on testosterone. I am trans. Please call me this. And they said, we don't have a field for it because it's medical, but I'm going to put it in your address. And I'm going to say preferred name. And they put it in bold. Amazing, amazing, amazing different Walgreens. So, like, they just found me a different location, better pharmacist. So, I promise, as long as you just come about it with your big heart, then you have a big heart. So, you'll be 100% fine. I love all your content because you just talk about who you are and the stuff that you're going through. And I understand that because I was so scared the first time I did that. So,
Yeah, and I posted that TikTok like an hour ago. That was today. So I went in. I go through like a company, a prescription company that mails me my prescriptions, but for some reason they're just not carrying the syringes that I need. So I have to go to Walgreens to get my syringe prescription. Everything else comes through the mail, but I get like 3 months worth in the mail, but in the prescription with the syringe, I only get 4 weeks at a time. So every month I have to call them and say, okay, I need four more. I need four more. And so I went in today and I was fully prepared to just be like, look, I know that you can't change the prescription name. I understand I haven't legally changed my name, but is there like a little box that you could put? And it just, there were a lot of people standing in line behind me. The pharmacist or the person that I dealt with was very nice, and I'm going to assume as an ally, very like young, kind of look to them. And I knew that that they would probably have been kind about it, but I didn't want to cause some sort of weird confusion and then back everybody behind me. And I just kind of panicked and was like, "Oh, I'll do it next time. Like, it's fine." But yeah, it's scary to go in, and especially in person, you have no idea how someone's going to react when you say, "Hey, just so you know, this is the name that I go by." You never know what kind of reaction you're going to get. And I, coming out mostly during quarantine and on the internet, haven't really gotten a chance to practice the in-person stuff as much. So that makes me a lot more nervous. Whereas like on the internet, I'm very good at standing up for myself, and in person it's a lot scarier. And now that the world's kind of opening up again, I'm taking them those my internet confidence into the real world and kind of building that up as I go.
I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. It is scary, and I've had actually had some issues with some people with some aggression in the public. Which if anybody watches any of my videos, they'll see me going ranting and raving about that because I don't like. I'm like, what is wrong with you people? I'm just trying to get gas, or like I'm just trying to do
Yeah.
something. Like, But I think it's a lot of people are stressed out with like all the PTSD and everything like that. So I would talk to you about this before we started recording, but the first TikTok I saw was when you just noticed about your arms changing and you were really super excited about that. And I think it's before your voice like really dropped to where it is now, because your voice is definitely really different from where it is now, and you were so excited. How is it feeling watching your body change and like really recognizing that for you?
It's good. I dealt with a lot of my dysphoria by channeling it through dysmorphia before I came out. So I was very active in the gym and always kind of looking at my body and trying to shape it in a way to become more masculine. And it kept me in shape and I looked great. I'm not saying I didn't look great, but my body, as an estrogen filled body was doing what estrogen filled bodies do. So I was becoming more feminine with all of my kind of fitness. So when I started testosterone, I started on a very low dose, started microdosing and kind of working my way up every couple months. And one day I just looked in the mirror and I was like, oh my gosh, my shoulders and my arms, it's not like, and I don't mean this in like any sort of offensive way, but it's not like feminine strength. It's like bulky, like masculine
Wider.
arm. Yeah, wider and like thicker. And I hadn't even really been exercising at all. So I could do maybe 7 push-ups without stopping before, because that was never just anything that I cared much to do. Um,
I
and
like that.
so before I had my top surgery, I was like, I wonder how many push-ups I can do now that I've been on testosterone for 7 months. And I did like 17
That's a
very easily. And I was like, whoa, even as I was pushing up, if I had recorded it, you would be able to see on my face like how confused I was that my body was still being able to do it. And it's just been wild to see these like changes that you don't notice day to day, but you'll catch yourself in the mirror or you'll hear a video or something from a couple weeks before and you're like, wow, that really did change. And I saw a picture of myself before I started and my jawline is different. And it's wild. My grandma is very supportive. She's 87, but she has started calling me the human experiment because she's never met a trans person. So I always call her and I tell her, what's happening with my changes, and she's like, you're like just like a little Frankenstein almost. And I was like, I prefer more Steve Rogers to Captain America kind of transition, but
I can see
but
that.
yeah. And she was like, well, it's fascinating to hear about. I can only imagine what it's like to experience it. And it's just been that's been one of my favorite ones. It's kind of bulking up because I was always real scrawny, real skinny, pretty like leanly muscular, but didn't have a lot of bulk to me. And that's kind of what I was missing. And that's what I'm getting back now, which I really appreciate.
I'm not mistaken, you're probably going through the same problem I am then right now. It's what are clothing and how can I keep up with this sizing?
Yeah. I very much like don't have any clothes. A lot of the button down shirts I have are hand me downs from guy friends, but who are like 6'1", and I'm 5'5". So all of those shirts are too big, and I always just think, you know what, I'm gonna grow into them. I'm gonna grow into my big boy shirts, and we'll be fine. But it's a lot like just puberty in
Yep.
your preteen years of you're gonna buy something you're not gonna have for very long because your body's going through all these changes. And it's exciting because the first time I went through puberty, it was not exciting. It
Same.
was very stressful.
It was very stressful. I agree. I was my wife and I were going. I know it's like the weirdest thing to buy. Like you think about when you're buying, but it's underwear, right? So I was going to buy underwear before I started testosterone. I was in an extra small because I'm like really scrawny too. Back in the day, really small, really thin. We have really slender frames in our family. Oddly enough, though, I'm a push-up, pull-up person. I love doing those. I've been doing those since I was a kid. But now I'm like in a mediums, and it's been months. I'm like, where did this happen? When did this happen? It's like, and then my wife's like, well, you're hairy too. She's like, you look at your legs. I'm like, look at my legs. Like, I'm an Ewok. So it's like out of nowhere it became an Ewok, a oversized medium. So it's so fascinating, but I can't. I'm like at the same point. It's like, why buy new things? Like, why buy nice things? It's the next few years we're going to be changing so much.
Mhm.
So now the important question: what made you decide to live openly and rather than being stealth on the public? Because there are trans people that we is stealth and they try to protect
Yeah,
themselves.
prefer to stay like in the background. I don't know. have always been, I was a theater major for my first semester of college, but I wasn't like super great at it, so I switched that over. But I've always been loud.